Okay, so we have Durele about to give his check-in on the pieces that he studied. So Durele, what I'd like you to do is give us a little bit of an overview of which pieces you studied, and then the floor is yours.
Okay, no problem. All right, so the pieces I decided to look at 2020 Vision by Phase 2, Music in My Head by BP Renegades, Madness by Youth Invaders, Happiness, Phase 2, Their Promoter, Republic Bank Exodus, Hooked in Me by BP Renegades, Sweet for Days by Supernovas, So Long, Trinidad All Stars. For my last two pieces, I decided to go back in time so that way I could do some analysis on old arrangements. So I did the infamous Carita Banca by Trinidad All Stars. They did over that arrangement, I believe 2004, but that's not the one I'm looking at. The one I did was the one I think in 1960 something. I forgot to mark down the year. Oh, my laptop's coming up as well. And also the last one I did was Tokyo, No Work for Carnival. So far, my overall analysis goes as follows. Panorama arrangements fall or are built on three main principles: structure, the process, and the devices. Within this, the generic structure goes as follows, as we all know: the intro into the expo, development, the recap, and the conclusion. Right? The process for me, but I had difficulties as well in terms of how do I distinguish process from the devices. And I had to actually go and search up the meaning of process. And I was like, okay, the process is like, and I compared it to like putting up a Christmas tree, where some family members, they start from the bottom up, or they start from the top, go down in terms of putting on the branches. So the process goes as follows, where alteration of the melody, whether they shorten certain notes or they lengthen certain notes to give us a musical effect. They will tend to have key modulation, layering, the bridge, interpolitan, which is, if I pronounce the word correct, which is also sampling, or what I would call a mashup, where they would infuse another song into the arrangement. And then we have the devices, which is like sequence, chromatic run, flick, rhythmic, imbroglio, the band phrase, the hammer strokes as we know it, that I call the decorations that helps the arranger bring more of his arrangement to life, if that makes sense. So far, I've also realized a lot of the times in the introduction, especially for the 2020 Vision, Music in My Head, Youth Invaders, Madness, Happiness by Phase 2. A lot of times the devices you'll find in that section tend to be with a band phrase / hammer stroke. I also got a little bit more in depth from what a band phrase compared to hammer stroke is. From what I learned, a hammer stroke, where the band will be playing their own thing, and then somehow they end up on one note. And a lot of the time that could lead to a band phrase, as we know, as the pam, 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 right? So a lot of times you'll find band phrase, hammer stroke, music, melodic fragmentation, where they will switch up the melody a bit, either, again, melodic diminution, that word, or melodic augmentation as well. And then also, when they are transitioning from intro to expo, or expo to development, or development to recap, or recap to conclusion, or development to conclusion, because not all the time they will tend to have a recap. There's always going to be a run. And I learned and figured that out probably by my fourth arrangement. I was like, okay, because how I have it documented here, I tend to have a colored ink pen showing, okay, introduction is from this start to this. It's starting here and ending here. Exposition starts here and ending here. So I use the runs to help me gauge exactly when it cuts, when the introduction finishes and when the exposition finishes. A lot of the times, they tend to use a sequential run, a sequential chromatic run. Runs such as, well, from my ear, runs that are diatonic or a short, quick thing happens more like just while in the music, if that makes sense. So for example, in the development section, a lot happens. A lot happens, right? So they will tend to use quick runs in the development section to get to certain notes or to switch to the minor, right? Whereas if they are doing more of a transition from intro to exposition, it will be more noticeable because it will be more of a sequential chromatic run, or it will be more of a sequential run, right? The exposition, if not all time, if not majority time, tends to usually just be the theme, which is the verse and chorus, followed by a few band phrases, and then they outer there and they in the development section. And they go in, right? If the recap does happen, it's not a long recap. I've learned the recap is just majority time, just as Macklin said, tends to be a reminiscence of the chorus, so that way the listener is reminded after they've done all their tricks and show off their skills in the development section that, oh, this is the song that we're playing, so just keep that in mind. Jam section, I will say 50-50 for me. Sometimes from what I've gained from my arrangements tend to begin with, the conclusion tends to begin with a jam session. If not a jam session, it will begin with a band phrase and then a band phrase into the jam section. And then you'll find more of like your rhythmic imbroglios coming down to the end as well, from what I heard. There will be there will be a few partial breaks. I'm just waiting for my laptop to come up so I could at least give you all some oral examples of the sequential run that I'm talking about. Right. What else have I been thus far?
Well, let me ask you a couple questions. What's the most surprising thing that came out of this study so far for you?
I've been most surprised. I guess it would be how constant, like in terms of. So we all know they have certain level of devices, right? But when I say constant, in terms of like how frequent it happens in certain positions, where it's almost like, unless the band itself use the device in a interesting way, it's like, okay, yeah, here we go. That's a band phrase, you know.
Right.
Okay. You know, so that to me, I would say is like somewhat the surprise. What I've learned as well, arrangers like Mr. Sharp himself, the one and only Boogie Sharp, the one Stewart. I would say what I've come to the conclusion based on their experience or their longevity in Panorama. And I'm still finding ways to break that down to bring it across in a clear way, but I will say this as far. The way they use their devices, it's not just, oh, we could do this here. It's very strategic. A a lot of the times coming down for the one store, the minor, coming down to his minor section, he uses a lot of call and response. There will be flicks as well. And at the beginning, it was difficult for me to hear what a flick is. I actually had to pull resources to be like, can you give me an oral sense in terms of what a flick sounds like? So people like the one store, Bugsy Sharp, coming on to their minor, they will do a lot of that, a lot of rhythmic imbroglio as well. And it makes sense because in the heat of the moment, basing off of the energy and the vibes, the energy that the arrangement is given off, it adds to it, and it just adds more intensity to the excitement. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. So for example, all right. So here we have phase 2 pan groove. Excuse guys for the lack of, sharing screen, but oh, shucks. Right, so here we have like phase 2 pan groove. So from their introduction, they go into their introduction, into their exposition. So listen out for the run or the sequential run that they will use. Oh shit.
That was recorded, huh?
Sorry.
All right, okay. So Durele, the sound isn't coming through. I think it's just overwhelming Zoom. So listen what? You've been about 10 minutes. I want to give everybody about that much time to talk through what they've done. You've done a good job.
No problem.
I like the fact that you have talked about having learned so much. The whole point of this is that we all learn, right? One of the things I learned in talking to you over the weekend was that, in the index, I was really kind of equating the band phrase with a hammer stroke, but I'm realizing that perhaps that might need to change because we might really need to separate those things into different related but different devices, right? So that's already something that has added to the study. I'm every little thing that happens, right? It's important that we note it, right? So good job so far, well done. And let's move on to now Astra was the next person in the room. No, wait, Astra was the next person in the room. I don't know if Astra is available. She said she's in a class and she mightn't be able to talk right away. Astra, you there? You able? Okay, Astra's not able. So let's move on to Mariah. Wait, Mark, there's to Mariah. 1 second, I have to stop the recording because the files get so big.